Recording, good to go. I see a recording button, so that's always a good sign. Okay, excellent. Welcome everybody to the last webinar in the Creating Effective Data Visualizations series. I have just realized that I've not put on my video. Why not? I'll say hi, even though it's nice and hot here. Hopefully you can see me okay. Right, in this last session, we have a few different things that we're going to be going over. But one of the main things that we're going to be working on in this session is working with Tableau Public. I sent around already an email suggesting that it would be good if you downloaded it potentially before we actually have this, this session. If you haven't yet and you want to be following along, it's worth quickly flipping over to public.tableau.com and signing up for an account and downloading. Right, so in this last one, we have quite a few things to get through, so I hope that we will be able to make it all through in time. We'll start with a quick review from the last webinar, and then I want to give you a bit of an introduction to Tableau, followed by some of the basic things. And then we will make a chart, and then we will refine some charts and visuals in Tableau, and then we will get to the fun bit, which is creating and sharing dashboards. And then, as this is the final webinar for this short course, we will talk again about the assignments and the schedule from here on out. So, just quickly to review from last week, what we talked about a lot was summarizing data sets. And does anybody remember what function that we used in Excel or in Google Sheets to summarize a data set? Jennifer remembers and says pivot tables. That's absolutely correct. And we use that to translate between raw data and crosstabs or summarized data. And then we've got something where we were merging data sets, and we used a function in Excel which was VLOOKUP. Alex has already prompted, he's one step ahead. And then we went through and made some better charts and worked to improve the Excel charts. And there were three things that I asked people to remember from last week. What were the three things? Edit, edit, edit. I'll count that as the three things because that's incredibly important. But edit is in principle one thing. What else can we do to quickly and easily improve a chart? Use clear titles, says Jennifer. Good. And last but not least, color appropriately. Excellent. And yes, having good labels is certainly important, but that wasn't one of the three, but it was maybe, that would have been on a short list of four, maybe. Excellent. One thing before we get too far away, last week I showed you, if you remember, in our pivot table, I had made a nice little map for you. I just wanted to really quickly say that if you click on this top right-hand side, you know there's two options here. One is to save the image, and that will download a high-resolution PNG file for you. Or if you publish chart, you'll actually be able to embed the chart in a website in what is effectively an iframe. So you can either choose to have the link, or you can do the embed, and you can choose whether you want it to just be an image or if you want it to be the actual interactive map. So that's something to experiment with and explore more. One of the things that we did last time was, of course, summarize the data sets. And that works really great for the ones that we need to use for to create Excel charts, and then we also merge those data sets. One of the homeworks was to merge two data sets, and there was already some discussion online about this exercise using the VLOOKUP, because you'll notice that I was a bit mean to you, and here we have the names of the different constituencies. This is the population data, and then this is just the raw sheet that I got from the ONS website. And you see that there are names, but there's also England, and there are electors for 2015 and for 2016, and there are spaces, and there's all sorts. There's Scotland and everything included. And indeed, this has Northern Ireland. This electors dataset has Northern Ireland and Scotland, but the population table only has England and Wales. So that's something to be aware of. I tried to give you the data in just what you might normally get. Just to really quickly go over this again, one of the things that I've actually done this here, I'm going to delete this column in my copied data set. But I just want to really quickly review this because there's one thing that we did specifically with the data set that we were working with last time, because it was raw data. But this data, what we have here in the selectors column or tab, is actually already summarized data with the 2015 and the 2016. So if we want to use a VLOOKUP, there was one step that we did last time that we don't need to do in this case. And I'm going to delete that as well and say, okay, so if we want to bring in the electors, we know that we're going to use the VLOOKUP. Yeah? So I'm going to start VLOOKUP. And then the first thing is what it calls here the search key, or what we were calling last week the unique key. In this case, what would be the unique key that we're looking for? What would be a unique cell that identifies something? Column A suggests quite a few people. Yeah, or possibly column B either. So either the constituency code or the constituency name. Both are already unique. You don't need the step that we used last week, which was to merge a few columns together, because both of those, in this case, are unique. And we're going to be looking them up in this table, and it does have the code, or it does have the constituency. So it can go basically either way. In this case, I'm just going to take the constituency name. So that's our unique identifier. If I then do the range, this one has to be in the leftmost column. We can go 1, 2. Now we have 2015 data and we have 2016 data. But our population is 2015. So which one do you think we should use for this one? Let's do like for like, and let's say 2015, which is in this case column 3. And then if we hit false, right now that happens to be formatted as a percentage rather than as just a regular number. But if we fill that down, that gives us the actual electors right there. Are there any questions on that? Because I know that there were some questions as people were going along and doing the exercise. Exciting. Well, one of the other things that we did last week was we actually turned information into a summarized form. But for Tableau, we definitely have to work in a raw format. So what I've done is I've taken the electors data, and I just wanted to show you really quickly how this can be tied in and what we can work with. In principle, this should be a year column here, 2015, and this column should be the number of electors, rather than having it as 2015 and 2016, in order to make it raw data. In this case, it's not going to give us any more columns, but if we had more years, it would be saving us some space in columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called Data Wrangler. It's a really useful tool if you're interested in it that can help you to kind of clean data sets. And in this case, what we're going to try and do is I'm going to paste that, and hit Wrangle, and with any luck, we've got our data into this particular thing, this particular tool. And one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to click the first row. And then here there's a promote field, and we can click on the left and say promote header to row to header, which now says that our headers are in each of these different ones. And to turn this data into raw data, I'm selecting the two, these are all descriptors over here. I'm selecting the two things that are not descriptors, and I'm going to hit the fold function. So total electors using header as a key. If I click that again, we can see that this says 2016, 2015. We would maybe want to tidy that into just the year and call that, instead of fold, rename that to year, and this one to total electors. And if we then hit the export button, we can get that, copy and paste it from a tab, select all, sorry, and straight into this information here. So here I've done that, tidied that up already. So it says 2016, 2015, 2016, 2015. That was very quick and dirty because that's not the point of this, this particular webinar, but I did want to show you that there are tools that not only help you convert from raw data into summarized data, but that can help you fold things and put it back into the raw data format. Okay, so that's a lot from last week. Now we get to do the fun bit, which is getting straight into Tableau. There was a question, which is, what is the link here? I can, oh, you've asked to share it in the forum. Yes, I'll share it in the forum rather than sharing it in the chat box right now. I'll be sure and do that. So basically, in this quick little introduction, I want to go over quickly what is Tableau, the various types of Tableau, and some of the costs and limitations. Tableau basically can take you from raw data into WYSI interactive visualizations and dashboards where one thing can filter lots of different charts and things like that. It's a data visualization platform that is very user-friendly. It's mainly drag and drop, and it is real-time, which I think is one of the advantages. One of the things I'm going to show you as we start setting it up is that you can actually connect it directly to a Google Sheet, and if that Google Sheet is updated, your visualization will automatically be updated. So that's really good if you're keeping track of live data, if you're monitoring the temperature, for example, which is going to be changing maybe once a minute or once an hour. It can actually visualize that. It's also useful for sharing interactive visualizations with others. There's a built-in system to help embed things on web pages, although I don't think it looks quite as nice as in the desktop version. And one of the great things about Tableau is that it works very well with large data sets. So I like to use it to do some of the number crunching when I have millions of rows of data, and then create a summary, a crosstabs table basically from it, and then hand code some things. We do have a request that people mute their microphones if they're not speaking. Apparently there's a little bit of background noise. Apologies for that. But if you can double check and make sure that your microphone is muted, that would be great. In terms of Tableau, there's actually lots of different types of Tableau. The one that we're going to be focusing on today is called Tableau Public. Tableau Public is the free-to-use version, basically. And then there's some limits and some caveats on that, and I will explain that in the next one. Tableau Desktop is a very powerful version with lots more connectors, and is available. They've just recently changed over to a subscription-based model, so it's, I probably should have checked what it was per month at this point, but a relatively reasonable, I'm going to say somewhere in the ballpark of $20 to $30 a month to use, whereas it used to be hundreds to buy up front, if not thousands. They also allow you to install your own server version. That's for hosting your own data, or you have basically places to store your data online if you're sharing your visualizations within your company. But what we're doing, or organization, I should say, but what we're going to focus on is only the Tableau Public version for today. Tableau Public does have a few limitations, as it's the free version. One of them is that there is 10 gigabytes of storage space. I don't know if you will all run up against that too quickly, but you know, it's still a limit. There's also a limit of 15 million rows of data per workbook. Again, I'm sorry if you have more than 15 million rows of data, but maybe it's time to upgrade to Tableau Public if you do. The biggest downside is that any data that you use in Tableau Public is stored publicly online. So if, for example, you're trying to work from your own analytics or something like that, then in principle that is shareable online. You can disable or is shared or is available or accessible online. You can disable downloads, but if somebody was really persistent, there's potentially a way of seeing that data. And it certainly doesn't have all of the features of Tableau Desktop. So there are some limitations there. But what I want to get into now is some of the Tableau basics. And for that, I'm going to be using the same data set that we did, yes, it was just last week. It seems longer ago than that somehow, which was the data set that we were looking at about the global burden of disease. So we had the death rates per 100,000 population, the number of deaths, and then that's also broken down by sex and by age group. The first thing that we want to do then is potentially find Tableau. This is the opening screen. And you can see that there's lots of different ways that you can connect things, whether it's through Excel or a text file, or there's various different server ones. I already have Google Sheets connected. So normally this would just ask for your Google Drive login there. And I'm going to select the sheet that we were working with last week, the global burden of disease, or a copy of that at the very least. Now, like I said, this is all live and running off the internet, so we'll see how this all goes. Now, what we can see here is that this is your way of selecting different data sheets. I believe that the copy that I have already has, yes, both the death rate and the deaths. We must have already done a VLOOKUP here before we put it in. So all I did was I dragged that into the center. One of the things that we're not going to go over today, but one of the things that's super powerful in Tableau is the ability to connect different data sources. So if you have the same data in a series of different databases, you can do a union and connect them all so that they're running all together. Or you can do other various joins, which can be really powerful. Now, that was kind of just connecting the data. And you'll see that the very first thing it says is to flip over down here in the bottom left to the first sheet. Or I was going to say there are 3 buttons here. There's new worksheet, new dashboard, and new story. What we're mainly going to be working with at the moment is just creating simple charts. So we can go ahead and create a new worksheet. Or we can work from sheet 1 for the time being. I just wanted to show you that that's there. So those are the 3 buttons: new worksheet, new dashboard, and new story. One of the things that you may or may not notice right away, but something that is incredibly important when it comes to Tableau, is that it automatically converted our data, separated it into something called dimensions and something called measures. Dimensions are effectively the categories or the descriptors of the data. They cannot be aggregated, meaning you can't add them together. So for example, age group is a dimension because you can't add the age group 0 to 6 days and the age group 1 to 7 days. It doesn't work like that. You can add together the death rates of those different categories, but you can't add together the categories themselves in the same way that you can't add together a date. For example, you can't add together tomorrow and today and come up with something that makes sense. You can check the change in the death rate between dates, but you can't just add the dates together. And
hey, Jeff.
generally,
sorry, this is Caitlin.
Yeah.
I missed how you got there, so if you could go back to, I have Tableau open up on my computer, but how do you get to where you are right now?
So do you have the data source? Have
I
you
do.
connected a data source? Do you have, does it look like this? So you needed to click the very first tab on that that said death rate and kind of pull it into the first
No, I'm
screen
sorry.
there.
I'm sorry. I have the Google sheet, but what do I do in Tableau to get it in Tableau?
Ah, where did I, let's see. What if I do a new one? Sorry. Thank you for asking, because this is one of those things where it's really easy to miss a step and then get totally lost. So
Right.
thank you for interjecting. So the very first step is always you're going to need to connect the data. So I don't know if you got to that. You hit the connect data.
No,
And then
no, I'm sorry. I'm at tableau.com and I'm signed into my account and it says gallery, authors, blog, resources, activity.
have you downloaded Tableau Public?
Yeah.
So you need to
Okay.
be in Tableau Public, the application, not on the website.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. I'm opening it now. Okay, now I'm here. So now I need to
connect to data to a server, which if you don't have Google Sheets there, if you go here, it should give you Google Sheets as an option. Then you need to sign into your Drive, select the sheet, and add the data like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Like I said, again, thank you for stopping there, because if you're not with us, then you won't necessarily just catch up. So what I think I was in the middle of saying was trying to explain the difference between dimensions and measures. So you see already it's done this. It said age group, country code, country name. I apparently have a random column there. Sex and year are all examples of dimensions. So these are categories of variable. Whereas measures, so like the death rate per 100,000 or the number of deaths, are actual countable things. They're things that can be added to or not. So those are measures, and you can see that this is what they call a pill in Tableau, these kind of, when they're in the circle. And if you drag that anywhere, measures are almost always going to be green pills, and dimensions will almost always be blue pills. And you saw that actually, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, to create something, it is as easy as pulling over the variable you want to work with, the pill, into either the rows or columns header, or you can actually pull it straight into the chart, depending on where you want to start working with, and it starts giving you different things. One of the things I'll just really quickly also say is that you see here on the left-hand side, this has an ABC. This means that this is a text variable. This has a world icon, so it's a geographic variable. Year is telling me is a number. That's not actually right, so I'm just going to switch that over to a date, just so that it knows that it's a date field rather than a number field. That's not necessarily important, but it can be helpful. Especially if you have more dates rather than, we just have a few years. We have 1970, 1980, 1990, etc. If you have actual days and things, it would be important to make sure that that's a year. Does that kind of make sense in terms of the difference between a dimension and a measure? And Jennifer asks, how do you switch the categories? Was that the kind of the what these different types of variable are category, I think you mean? If you, on the left here, if you just click on it, not on the pill something, it gives you the chance to change the name if you click there. But on the left, you see how that highlights a little box. If you click there, you can change it to number or whatever. And then one thing that's always true about Tableau is basically, if you right-click anywhere, you're going to get another different type of you're going to get a pop-up menu of some sort. So either you can click this down arrow and get the menu, or you can right-click and that menu will come up. And you see that there is the ability to change the data type, and you can even convert it to a measure. If, for example, it thought that it was a dimension, but it wasn't quite right, then you can convert it to a measure. In the same way, if year, for example, if they misinterpreted it, and as a number had been put in the measure, we could have converted it to a dimension. So that's a really good tip in Tableau. When in doubt, right-click and see what's hiding there, because you might never know. This is another interesting one, the geographic role. They've really been trying to expand this in Tableau. At the moment, it doesn't work super well below the country level. Although for the US, they have a lot more options than are there in other places. Right, but now we're definitely getting ahead of ourselves. But that's a really important distinction, the one between dimensions and measures. What we also have here then is the marks card. This marks card you see has things like color, size, text, detail, and tooltip. And I think the easiest way for me to just start explaining things is to start dragging our variables into the different areas, and we can see what we need. So I'm going to put deaths in row, and I'm going to actually go ahead and put year up in columns. Now you can see just by doing that, it automatically has created a chart that has all of the different, the sum of total of all of the deaths that we have in our spreadsheet from 1970 to 1980 to 1990, etc., etc. But as you recall, we have a few different things in a few different variables in that. So if we wanted to, we could say, actually, why don't we disaggregate that by our age group? So if we pull age group into detail, we can see that all ages obviously has quite a significant number because it's adding all of these together, but then down here it would have all of the different groups that we have in our age groups. And interestingly, now we can start seeing that for a lot of people, for the 1 to 4-year-olds and things, the total number of deaths is going down, but for the 80-plus-year-olds, it's going up drastically. We could also do the same, and you see there I just took the pill and I dragged it over to the side to take it away. We can do the same with the sex, and probably more interestingly, or at least more helpfully, instead of putting it in detail, if we put it in color, it does the exact same thing. So now we at least get a key over here on the side that says blue is both, red is male, and yellow is female by default. If you click that, you can actually edit the colors and change, let's say we want female to be green, then we can go ahead and change that way. The size tab, I can show you some things in a different type of chart. Let's see. If we take away the year category for now, and we have the number of deaths, let's see, let us do this. And I say, actually, let's make the size the number of deaths. And then we say detail, country code. You can see that India has the biggest total number of deaths, followed by China, followed by the USA, etc. So, and these are scaled by now the size of that particular metric. Did that make sense? There are some people that are wondering if I'm going through the steps on the screen. I am going through the steps on the screen, Caitlin. Are you sure that you're looking at my screen share, or are you looking at your version of Tableau? Just to double check. It says I'm viewing Jeff's screen. So right now I'm putting the year in, and now I'm going to go ahead and put in the number of deaths. And that does give us by default a line chart. I'm seeing that on my screen as well. A lot of other people. Is there anybody else who's not seeing that? It's not indicating that there's anybody else who's not seeing that. Okay, Caitlin, sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what to tell you. It could be a connection issue, or I'm not quite sure. Sorry about that. We will see you back shortly. Right. So, where were we? We were in the marks card. We've gone through shape, color, size. Here we have text labels, and you can actually change what appears. So let's say we actually wanted to show the number of deaths there. If you drag that in, that actually shows the label. In a similar way that the tooltip will do the same thing, is the little thing when you hover over a point, you see that that brings up a little box. That's called the tooltip. And we can actually control what shows up there. So the number of deaths, right now it's only at 10. We can make it bigger. We can play with the formatting. So now if we scroll over it, you can see that it looks a lot bigger. So that marks card is really going to help you refine your various charts and see, yeah, what you might want to do. You even have the ability with separate things to change it from a line chart to an area chart, or well, I suppose even circles if we wanted to get away from the lines, although I don't know why we necessarily want to do that. But I'm going to leave it at automatic for now. And that shows us we have time series data, and it has automatically given us a time series chart, which is great. Are there any questions on that bit? I think I hear somebody, but it's very, very quiet.
Sí.
Glenn, are you trying to ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. I'm having trouble hearing you, so maybe try and get close to the microphone.
It depends, but there are various things that you should consider, that we should consider there. And it is like, I mean, imagine that you are asking me as an independent consultant. What I would say is, give me what you have. Let me take a look at it and look at the worst case scenario and budget it for you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. Okay, so there was another question here from Jennifer saying, does it automatically pick the best chart? Yes, and so there are a few, well, not necessarily the best chart, but it will automatically pick relevant charts. So one of the things I also want to show you is the Show Me tab. So you can see that it says, it gives you a number of different options. So we could just have a table of the numbers. That just shows the size of the different charts. There's the different, there's a heat map of it that we can do. It doesn't let us choose the maps because we don't have any geographic data. So you can see on the bottom right of that, it says for a symbol map, you need to have at least one geographic dimension and then one or two measures or a few dimensions. We could change it over into a bar chart. But we do know that for time series data, one of the best things to do is to have a line or possibly an area chart, depending on what we're trying to show. I wonder if, Sophia, would you be able to mute Glenn, or Leandro, if you can mute Glenn, that would be helpful. Thank you. One of the next things is we also have a couple of boxes here on the top left called filters and pages. And these are really important because if you remember the data that we have, this is actually not a correct chart so far. right now we say in the year 1970 there were 173 or so million, 100 million deaths. No, 173 million deaths. There we go. And what we know is that, for example, that includes something that is, if we put this on here, okay, that's both female and male. So you can see that both is 86 million, which is about much closer to correct. Male is 46 and female is 40 million. So basically what that's doing is that's double counting. It's saying we have both male and female. So what we can do is you can, I did this in a number of different ways. Let's say we want to exclude that both number. If you click in the legend, and you saw that right there, something came up that said exclude. We can do that way, and now that is no longer appearing on our chart. And it's now coming up in this filter section here. If you double click that, you can also see that we can change this around. Right now we're saying do not include both, and this little exclude button is checked. Or if you unclick it, then now what it's going to show us is the opposite chart. It's only going to show us the both. There's a number of different ways to achieve a similar goal in Tableau. So we did it through that way. We can also actually just drag that pill into the filters tab, and we can say, okay, let's get rid of both, and we can do that. In the same way, we also know that we have an issue with the age group, because right now it is double counting all of the age groups plus all ages. So why don't we just keep all ages and hit select. And now if we take away this from the color tab, it's going to re-aggregate. And we're going to say that in 1970, there were 43 million deaths. That's much closer to what we were looking for. So it's really important to also think about how your data is structured. In this case, we have a bunch of subtotals that are really messing things up. So make sure that you then filter those out and that we're using those filters as we go throughout. The other one up here is the pages. This is something that helps us to actually animate our visualization if we wanted to. Normally, I don't use it for time series data. I use it, often I put the time data there to kind of show how things are changing. And I'll show that in a second. But in this case, we could use, for example, the country name. And for some reason that, of course, didn't work. There we go. Country name and saying, heck, there's a lot of members, but that's fine. We can say that's fine. And now we're seeing the sheet one now says Afghanistan. And we can tab through and we can see the total number of deaths as we just scroll through here on the right. Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Armenia, etc. If you then hit this button, so sorry, I suppose I should have been doing that here before, that you were checking that. But if you hit this button, then it will, I'm not doing anything anymore, and it's just going through all of the different countries. We can stop, and we can also change to the different countries. So not an example, but maybe, where's China? There we go. Maybe China is because there are just that many more people there. Okay, so that is showing all of these different elements. This is basically the idea of going through all the elements. We've had the filter, and now we have the page, which is what is showing the animation. So the question from Jennifer is, how would you change the range on the axis? Haha. This one we have to be slightly careful with because obviously it's basically choosing a range, which is 10 million. It's set on automatic for now. There's going to be something like China or India or one of the larger countries, India, for example, that had 9.9 million deaths in 2010. So that's why it is keeping the axis the same. As it's really showing you, it's allowing you to compare the vast differences between these different countries. So you probably would want to keep them the same. I don't know if you remember the very first week, I think we said if you are using the same axis, it's one of those ways that's easier to compare. Obviously, it's a really huge difference in numbers, right, between 231 in the Republic of Korea, 231,000 versus nearly 10 million. So that's where maybe instead of deaths, we would do death rate, and that gives us a lot more kind of useful comparison. But you asked, and I suppose I should deliver, you asked how do you change the axis. If you select the axis and right-click, just with everything, you can hit Edit Axis, and you can hit Fixed, so that it's 0 through to, let's make it 10 million, or let's make it, I don't know why I've said that it's 300,000, but it's going to be 300,000 now. Okay, so that at least allows us to change that. Good. Whew. That's already a lot of work. And I've also done the Show Me tab already. Yes, my goodness. Okay, so those are some of the, the very, very basics of putting together a chart in Tableau. We've had a couple of questions so far. Before I move on to refining these charts, are there questions on how we got to where we've got to? Excellent. I'm going to carry on then and say, let's go to refining charts and the visuals. One of the things that you may have seen me do is I've been quite careful to choose deaths rather than death rate. But why don't we go ahead and add in the death rate. And already we know that the death rate per 100,000 people is 115 million. That can't possibly be the case. Why is it potentially giving us so high of a number? Any ideas? There's duplicates in there. Okay, so that's one reason. So we need to say filter out again, only to show both sexes instead of both and male and female. And then we need to drag the age group and we need to only show that. Whew, okay. So that's still giving us 1970 is 222,000 per 100,000 population. That looks too much. What's happening now? Any guesses? Countries being added up, absolutely correct, Jennifer. So it says it right here, it says sum of the death rate. Instead of the sum of the death rate, what we want to be looking at is the average death rate among all the countries. So just like anything in Tableau, if you right-click or if you click that drop-down arrow, you have a measure. And one of the things that we can do is we can actually change what it's showing. So in this case, let's say it would make sense to probably do the average of all countries, and then that's giving us a number of the average death rate per 100,000 people across all countries is 1,189. In 1970, in 1980, it's that, et cetera, et cetera. So it was down here, you hit the measure, and you can choose whether it's the sum, the average, the median, the count, the minimum, maximum, all of that right there. So we did a range before where we were looking at the minimum and the maximum. We can see we can do that right there. And if we wanted to, in fact, we can, let's see, do another chart that has the maximum. And then if we right click this, we see this is me being cheeky again. Let's go ahead and put that on the dual axis. And then if we right click this right axis, it says synchronize. And there we go. We've now put the min and the max death rates for all of that. Okay, so one of the first things that we've done is we've changed the measure types. We can display different information, not just the sum. We can choose the average, the median, the count, etc. As with everything, this is such a powerful tool, so it's always important to figure out what you're trying to, what sort of information you're trying to convey. One of the next fun things that you can do with Tableau is run table calculations. And these table calculations basically put in a particular calculation across time or across the table or down the table, so it can do ranking. One that is potentially quite helpful is a running total, or sometimes changing it into the percent of total can be useful, or doing a moving average automatically can help smooth things out as well if you have lots of data points. That's another way of working with this. So I'm going to quickly get rid of that minimum. I'm just going to give it our average to work with. And the question was, let's see, what can we do with a table calculation? In this case, right, I want to edit the axis and put it back to automatic now. I've jumped back over to deaths rather than death rate because we're going to start adding things together again. You see, if you right-click, you can add a table calculation, a quick add a table calculation, and if we do running total, we can see that since 1970, according to this data set, there have been 237 million some odd deaths, basically. Now, does that mean that there were 237 million deaths in 2010? No, that's saying since the data collection was started in 1970, we've had 237 million people have died. So that's the table calculation. You can also edit the table calculation, and this gives you a lot more that you can work with. So you could say difference from, and you can choose specific things that you want it to have a difference from. Or if you have a moving calculation, you can kind of have it do the average of the previous two or the next two, or different things like that. You can also have it calculate based on different dimensions if it's applicable. In this case, I still think that probably the running total is the most useful one that we can be showing. What does difference from mean? So there's a question that we have from Jennifer here. If you are, a lot of times people will put together, for example, an index. So if you have things that are very different in terms of raw numbers, right? Like the number of deaths in China is very different from the number of deaths in Switzerland, for example. But you can see how much they have changed from their starting position in 1970. So if you did a table calculation of the number of deaths by country, so let's see if we can do this. I'm scared to do this live, but we're gonna have fun. Let's put in all the countries by color, add all countries. Let's clear the table calculation. You can see up here, India and China are really high, and there's all of these ones down here, and so it's very difficult to tell the difference between them. We can add a running total, and again there we see that there's just a huge discrepancy there with India and China. Let's see if this is going to give us anything any better actually there, because if we do a difference from, this is changing difference from year to year to year, the change. So let's say that that's what we were trying to show. So you can say that that's the difference from the previous year was nearly 1 million more deaths between 1980 and 1990 in China. Does that make sense? So that's the difference from, or we can also do the percent difference from. And we can choose previous, next, or we can say always from the first. So we can see that these are countries, for example, where in Bangladesh the death rate has gone down since 1970. These are where it's gone up. So the Russian Federation, for example. Yeah, does that make sense? Or we can say percent difference from. And we can see that apparently the United Arab Emirates has increased the most. Yes, Jennifer says, sorry for asking so many questions. That is not something to apologize for. I hope that I'm not confusing everybody else, but it's good to have questions. That means that you're kind of following along. So don't apologize ever for having questions. Good. So we can adjust it. I've gone over table calculations because I think those can be quite helpful. One of the other really powerful things that you can do is to calculate new variables. That can help you with creating tidying up your data, or to create groups, or to do logic on things, so saying if it's bigger than this, do this, or something else. And so one of the examples that I've done is an if-then calculation. And so what this one is saying is if the variable age group is 0 to 6 days, then it will be, let's rename it child. And so it does this else if the age group is 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 7 to 27, all these years and days, then they all become children. Otherwise, as long as it's not all ages, which we just are saying ignore, make it null. Otherwise, call them anybody above 19 years old, basically an adult. So I'm going to quickly escape that so I can copy that, so I don't have to actually type that all in again. I can put this formula, if you want to explore it, in there. This is going to be a new dimension called, we can call it what we want to. So if we right-click on our dimensions, we see that we can create things like create a field. In this case, the field that I would like to create is something, let's call it is child. And I'm going to paste that one in there, and you can see it's checking, is the age group this or this or this? I had this problem earlier. Quotation marks can be difficult. You have to make sure that you're using the proper type of quotation mark. And in this case, I have not in that one, so it was giving me an error. But now that is showing me a valid calculation. So if we create a new chart and we say deaths, for example, let's do total number of deaths again. Let's do it by year. And we still need to filter out the both and the, actually all ages shouldn't matter for this, but let's go ahead and filter those out. I'm worried on that, hold on a second. Because we said all ages is null, so I think we need to do that. So why don't we add that into the child marker, and we can say adult deaths, the number of deaths of adults is going up, and good news, the number of deaths of children is going down. Null, we can probably just get rid of there. That was our case. So there we are. We've now created our new group, adults and children, and that was all done by right-clicking here in the dimension, or we could maybe need to do it for a measure if there was something else that we need to do, and saying create a calculated field. But yes, the good news is that the number of deaths of children is going down. One other thing that I want to show you before we go too far here is that this has the geo one. If we put the country name up here in the top, and again, maybe we do the death rate in there, a lot of times this will come up automatically, but it hasn't in this case, so why don't we go ahead and just put in the show me category there, we can see that it has automatically created a map for us. Like with everything that we've done, we need the filter. And we could do it the other way around and say select all. Yeah. Or we could have excluded just the age group. There's lots of different ways of doing the same thing in Tableau. And this is the total number of deaths. It's not broken down by year. But that's okay. But what we can do is we can then turn this into a dual axis. I've already showed you this a little bit, but I didn't show you this in terms of a map. So in the map, if you go ahead and hit Control or Command and just drag that pill over, you can see that it's basically reproduced this. Again, if you then hit dual axis, then it all shows up on the same map. And you see here on the marks tab, there's now an all, and then you have these two different latitude mark tabs. So instead of the death rate, why don't we do the number of deaths? And in this one, instead of saying automatic, maybe let's turn these into circles, for example. And if we turn those circles and we say the size is by the number of deaths, you've got the combination now. In China, it has a lot of deaths, but a relatively low death rate by putting those both on the same map. Does that make sense? We have one question that is the geomap available on Tableau Public? Can I use my own data to generate these maps? So yes, Tableau Public has a lot of maps already built in. As I said, they're really good at the country level. If you have data on US states, for example, then that will come up automatically. What they've just done in this version is, I believe that there's a way to add in your own shape files, so that if, for example, you have districts within a country, or states within Brazil, or something like that, or provinces within China, that it will automatically do that. One of the questions here is, do we need to connect the names of countries with the map, or will it do this automatically? In this case, it has done it automatically. One thing to be aware of in the map, you see right down here, this is a good place to check, it's saying for unknown. So if you click that, you can edit the locations. Controversially, it's not accepting occupied Palestinian territory. Let's see if it will give us Palestine, and will give us Palestinian territories. And then Congo, there's a question of, is this Congo-Brazzaville or Democratic Republic of? It's not the Democratic Republic of, so why don't we call it Congo-Brazzaville rather than Kinshasa? And you can see that now that has been fixed. The other way of doing that is if you go into the map menu, there's a button here that says edit locations, and you can check things that way. Command is for Macs. There's a question here, what is command to create the dual axis? I don't have it on the keyboard. That's because command is for Macintosh or Apple Macs. It's the same button as control, basically. If you're on a PC, use control, and it should do the same thing. Although let me know if it doesn't. I'm sorry, I'm working from a Mac. Any other questions here? One other fun thing with this is that the background maps, there's actually a bunch of map services. So you can add things from places like Mapbox, and so you can create different looks and feels for your different maps. That's just another, I don't have that something ready to show you there, but that might be interesting. So that was the dual axis. We did the dual axis in a similar way in one of these. See, this is exactly what happens when I get into Tableau. Tableau is one of those great ones for the visualization type where you're kind of exploring things and trying to figure out what makes sense, what am I trying to show? Because you can input the data once, like we've done, and we can see I've started manipulating it and saying, okay, what happens if I look at the country name? Oh, which one has changed the most in terms of percentage since 1970? You know, the Maldives apparently has 55%, nearly fewer deaths in 2010 than in 1970. So you never know what kind of interesting things you're going to find. Andorra's, on the other hand, is going way up. Or we started putting things in by, okay, what about there's death rates are going down, but actually the number of adults is dying is going up, but the number of children is going down, which is a good thing. So it's a really great way to explore data and try and find some of those stories. Now, I'm not going to go into huge detail on this, but formatting, there are some things that you can change in the Marks tab, which is what I've been showing you here, right? So if you click on that, you can edit the colors, and we can change it. You can import your own color set if you want, and then if you choose the child is now going to be purple, or that pinkish purple, whatever that is, then it will change that automatically. The size of things, so if I make that bigger, that's going to give us a wider line. And the labels and the tooltips, if you click in here, right now there's not anything there. So if we put on that the number of deaths, you can actually change that in there, and we can make that bigger. Let's make that 12, just for fun. However, most everything else that you change is with the Format tab. You can, in the menu, there's this, and you can change the fonts universally. You can see that there's this format pane that comes up here on the left. And Tableau has its own default font, but you can make it, you know, Times New Roman if you're classic like that, or you know, Arial if you prefer your sans serifs and things like that. Axes, I showed you how to change the scale. I haven't shown you how to edit the names on that. Again, if you right-click Edit Axis, it says the title right in there. Sometimes with Tableau, this is quite important because you get weird ones like this, the year of year. That's because if you notice on date ones, it's really great. You can actually, in this case, we don't have our data in anything but the year, but you could do year, quarter, month, day, and then this is the exact quarter, month, day. It gets down into hour and minute. So you can see peak times, people are doing something or whatever. But this is saying year of year now, which doesn't make sense. So if we edit axis, we can just change the name. So it just says year. Beyond that, Format tab has basically everything else. Any questions on this next bit, on refining some of our charts? I know this is a lot to take in. This is actually snippets from a 4-hour session that I've done before on Tableau. So sorry to be rushing through, but there we are. Excellent. One of the last things then that I want to show you, that's one last new thing to wrap your head around, is someone said, to learn this, I think I need to practice more. I couldn't agree with you more there. I think practice is going to be very, very critical here. Because I think the thing that is difficult about Tableau is that as with resources like Excel or things that we were looking at before, if you have a question and I'm not around, try Googling it, and there's lots of information there. But there's not very much information that I found on Tableau that is kind of, okay, wait, what does the marks card do? What does this feel? What are the basics of Tableau? So that's what I've tried to give you today, is some of the basics. And this is a super powerful tool. And so if you want to explore more, I highly recommend Googling your questions and practicing. So I showed you how to create a new worksheet. I do want to show you how to create as well a new dashboard. So this button here on the left was new worksheet, and then in the middle is the new dashboard. So you can see here that we now have something that looks similar to what we had before, but it is a little bit different. And basically, what you have is an objects box that controls the different things that can go into a dashboard. So there's images, you can actually embed web pages, text, or sometimes if you need a spacer of some sort, then you can insert a blank thing here. Or you can make sure things are horizontal or vertically aligned. I'm going to go ahead and say we need a horizontal set in, and then let's actually start dragging things around. One other thing that I'm going to do is, this says right now there's a minimum size and maximum size. I'm going to untick the maximum size so that this fills things out. Now you see what is over here are all of our different worksheets. So we have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4. I suppose I haven't done this, but probably what would be good here is if we actually gave them meaningful names. So if you double click on that sheet, just like in Excel with a tab, if you wanted to say, so this is death rate, this is just average death rate. for example, then what we can see here is this actually then shows us average death rate. I'm going to go ahead and start by putting in our map, and this looks very similar to just having a worksheet. But then the fun thing is that we can, we can then put in the another chart that goes with it. So this is our average death rate, and this is now there in our dashboard. Okay, that might be useful. But maybe we want to do more than that. So just like the other thing with the pills, this is drag and drop. If you right click, you can think about things like fit. So how big is it actually supposed to be? If there's some reason that you want to lock it. Otherwise, I usually try and have it fill the entire view so that it defaults to that. One of the other things that in this case, for example, sheet 4 is not useful as a title. So if you go here and unclick the title, then that will disappear. But the entire reason that we have charts like this, sorry, there is one other thing there. We have a whole bunch of things that are over here that can sit over there, but generally speaking, we want to make our labels go as close to the charts as possible. So if you select floating, then that means that they're not locked into a specific element, and you can move it around the screen and you can maybe put it in a place that makes more sense, or you can get rid of it entirely if you don't need it, or you can, you can play with that there. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those particular items for now. The best thing about having a dashboard, though, is that you can add interactivity to it. So, scrolling over the Russian Federation, seeing the number of deaths and the death rate, okay, that's maybe useful. But what's more interesting is that if here we say use as filter, we can start to create things that say this is the death rate. If we click on this, now our chart on the left updates to show us what the death rate looks like specifically in Russia. So we're using the map as a filter, and when we click on the US, it'll show us the US death rate, Canada's death rate, Mali's death rate, and it just kind of updates depending on whatever we have there. And this filter can be used universally, so we could add more. Let's see, was this one deaths or death rate? That's sum of deaths. Let's change that to, instead of the sum, let's do that, the average death rate. And that one is now broken up by child or not. And we can put this one in there. And again, that filter holds true for both of the charts now. Is that making sense? I think that probably, now that we have more than one chart there, it makes sense to maybe put the map on top, and you can see that we can then kind of squeeze those charts down so that we have the map there, and then we can be selecting things like China and whatever. Whew. How did I do the filter again? Yes. The filter, I just, like everything basically, if you right click, this isn't quite going to show it to you. You have to be hovering over and then click into a particular worksheet. And then there's, on this little down arrow, there's something here that says use as filter. So that's all I've done. Is you can see if I click in here, that tick box says use as filter. And that is what is actually then filtering the other two charts. You could use these as filters, but it's going to be a bit weird. So this probably is going to give us a really weird number. I don't know if that's now in the map giving us 2010 numbers. Maybe. It's certainly only giving us what are 2000 numbers, only giving us one data point and those other ones. So you can make as many things a filter as you want to, but it doesn't always make sense to use everything as a filter. A lot of times something like a map can be a really useful one. And maybe there are other charts and things as well. Whew. Right, we are rapidly running out of time. So the one last thing that I want to show you is that you can then save this on Tableau Public. If you go into File, Save to Tableau Public. This might take a minute. You have to have your account. Let's see if I'm able to do this. We can save this as, I'm going to call it OTT test 2. And you can see here there's this option here to keep my data in sync with Google Sheets. So the great thing, like I said, about the fact that there's the Google Sheet connector is that if you update information on your sheet, then it automatically will update the visualization, which is really great. So this just takes a moment. And is the data public as soon as you save it? Yes, it is. But like I said, there are a couple of options in here. One of them is that you can't download it. So people might not have access to the raw data itself. But yes, it is basically, you see that this is taking a little bit of a while because it's uploading all that information. The joy of live demonstrations. Hopefully this will actually work. Any questions while we're waiting for it to save? Oh, aha. So you see that that then takes us to a page here on Tableau Public. And this is, I would say, I mean, it's both a strength and a weakness, right? So Tableau Public itself is incredibly powerful. And it more or less works on its web-based version. I think it doesn't look quite as nice, and it doesn't work quite as well on the web-based version, but it is there. Again, if you share it, you can embed it, or you have a link directly to it. You were asking about whether or not it's public. What you can do is you can untick this box here that says allow workbook and its data to be downloaded by others. For the most part, there's a question here, are other users notified when you upload? No, they're not. Not to the best of my knowledge, at least. And you can actually say, don't even take this to link this to my profile here so people can't find it. And you can either basically, so there are ways of getting around this, right? So you can show workbook sheets as tabs, or if that remains unclicked, then right now, all we have here, if, as, and when it loads, is you see there aren't any other sheets here, and people, I'm able to download because I'm logged in, but there's no other, basically, tables. No other tabs. If you show the workbook sheets as tabs, I am showing you this for a reason, I promise. Basically, the one trick that I have, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's 100% safe, but one trick that you potentially could do is if you make sure that that is not available to see the other tabs, then, yes, see now these tabs show up here, sheet 4, sheet 3, sheet 1, whatever. If you click that that option isn't available and you save it on a blank screen, then people will be able to basically see nothing. So it looks like an empty visualization. So that's a bit cheeky, but that's a possibility. Having said that, Tableau will still in the back end potentially have access to your data. I don't know that they would use it, but in principle, it could be there. Good. So that is showing on Tableau. We've had a few questions in terms of notifications and is everything public. This is your chance for any final questions on Tableau before we move on to the last, very, very last bit of the course, which is the final assignment. Would it be stored on there forever, and do they remove them periodically? Like, what if they look rubbish? I don't know if they remove them, but in your profile, you should be able to see all of your different visualizations. Like I did a test this morning, which is a nonsense one again. If you hit the delete, you can actually get rid of it that way. So it's not necessarily there for in perpetuity. Right. Then the last thing that I will say is we have, of course, this is the last chance to take a look at the assignment. You need to, in order to complete this course and to get a certificate, complete an assignment. You have 4 different options that you can choose from. You can either tidy a data set, refine a chart, create an interactive dashboard with Tableau, or you can go completely off-piste and create your own visualization. We've taken a look at already how to tidy a data set. One thing I had to refine in the questions is which English or Welsh constituency, because we don't have data on Scotland or Northern Ireland, which I did on purpose, but I forgot to then change the wording of the question. So if you are going to do that, if you can answer the question as which English or Welsh constituency has the highest share of electors of their population and which one has the lowest. You can improve one of the charts that I've made available and that aren't very good on purpose using the information from last week. Or you can create an interactive dashboard using the same data set that we've been using as an example all along. I think that this data is rich enough that there's lots of different visualizations that you can make of it. So I wanted you to be working with something that you're already familiar with actually for this one and see what you can do creatively. The requirement here is that the dashboard has at least 2 different visuals and one of them should act as a filter of the other. But you can do a few more than that if you'd like to, but at least one thing should do a filter. Exercise 4 is to create your very own visualization. Maybe you were really Maybe you were really keen to work on something completely else. Maybe you had qualitative data that you wanted to explore how to visualize. You are able to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and create your own visualization. But it would be best if you've used one of the tools or techniques that we've discussed during the course. And when you do, include in the email the target audience, the main objective, and if there's anything else I should know about the data. We did have issues with this last year. I want you to know that these will only be sent to me. And therefore, you don't have to, if it's confidential data, I can sign a non-disclosure agreement if you'd like, but otherwise just know that I'm the only one that's going to see it. I'm not going to share it with anybody else. The data is going to be yours. But those are your exercises. Those need to be done and sent to me, emailed to me at jeff@quaternary.co by the 29th of June. By the 6th of July, I will have comments back on those for you. And as we complete the course, I would also ask you, I believe Sophia, but maybe Leandra will be sending around a link to an evaluation. If you would please be so kind as to fill that out, I would much appreciate it. And upon that, you will get your certificate of completion. So I hope that that has been a helpful few webinars here for you and that you've at least learned one new thing out of all of this. Hopefully even many more than that. If you have any questions, there are the forums that are available and you can always email me or send me a message through the forum if you'd like. So with that, I suppose I will say, just in case there are any other questions, I'll look to the chat. Otherwise, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you all so much for participating over the last few weeks, and I look forward to seeing the exercises that you hand in. As I've said before, you only need to submit one to get the certificate, but you're welcome to do more than one if it would be helpful for you to practice. Excellent. Thank all of you as well for the participation. It was really great to have such an interactive crew. I do really appreciate that as well. Excellent. Have a good evening, everybody, or morning, or I always say that, and I forget that people are joining us from all around the world. Have a good day, let's say. All right. Bye.